Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, we are back live inside our hotel in Indianapolis at Big Ten Media Days. Lots of stuff to talk about. And Tony, I don't know how well the internet connection is going to work here tonight. It was not outstanding last night, but at least it's doing better than the Pac-12.
Doing better than Pac-12. I was also going to suggest maybe we move the show towards the middle of the season. But we can discuss all of these things. The Pac-12, Tom, with the news that Colorado is headed for the Big 12. I feel like this is not that Colorado is some sort of linchpin or keystone, but they're kind of like that because now why stay? And in terms of like, I guess Washington, Oregon, why would they stay? Because they can't go anywhere, perhaps. But I want to see what happens with these corner schools next. But Colorado to the Big 12.
Colorado to the Big 12. When I'm thinking about the impact this could have, I think about if you ever read History of War, and it's, it could be the history of the Crusades, the history of people fighting Genghis
I thought
Khan.
you were talking about the card game. I'm sorry. Go on.
No, yes. Pick your battle. There are so many times in history when an army could have stayed together, could have fought, could have potentially won the battle, and then someone freaks out and runs, and it turns into a rout, and everyone runs, and that's when everyone gets stabbed in the back. Yeah. And it feels like Colorado has turned and run, and now are the rest of the four corner schools that you mentioned, Arizona, Arizona State, Utah, Washington, Oregon. Are they going to say, we are going to stay? This is like a prisoner's dilemma situation where if everyone stays, if everyone just holds fast, it'll be okay. But if someone flips, everybody loses. And Washington and Oregon going to decide, you know what? It's not what we want, but we might just go to the Big 12 just because certainly the Big 12 will be excited to have us. Arizona makes a ton of sense to me in terms of it's a basketball school in what is a very, very basketball-heavy conference. It feels like we've seen the first domino fall, and now if one more domino falls, we're going to see potentially a huge change in college football again. Yeah,
it's going to be interesting to see what happens with what remains of the Pac-12 because the remains of the Pac-12 won't be all that enticing. Tom, I would suggest you mentioned getting stabbed in the back after you turn and run. I think Colorado stabbed the Pac-12 in the back and then turned and ran, which is the most cowardly thing you can do on a battlefield, by the way. But I wonder, and I don't even know how feasible this is, if Washington and Oregon say, we will come to the Big Ten for $50 million a year. And they're making more, but because they can't make a full share because they won't bring in enough to earn a full share. But what if they're comfortable, taking less, but they'd still be making more?
And I don't know if they even need to make $50 million because the Pac-12's TV deal has still not been negotiated. And we talked on last night's show about how that was handled at Pac-12 Media Days. And the commissioner goes up there and sort of like vaguely hints like, well, we're not going to be announcing because we don't want to overshadow the event. And there's one follow-up question, which is, so do you have a deal? And the answer was like, well, no. Technically, no, but also not technically, also no. And it feels like if you are Washington or Oregon and you want to get out while the getting's good, you are at a point now where Oregon football, Washington football, these are not programs that on the football field are comparable to Rutgers. But Rutgers also was whatever you need from us, however little you need us to take for however long you need us to not take it, we'll do it. And eventually we'll get a full share in the Big Ten. And that's fine because that is so much better than the alternative. You wonder if maybe this changes Washington and Oregon's bargaining position where are they better off taking $40 million from the Big Ten for the next through this existing TV contract? What is ESPN and not ESPN? What is Fox and CBS and NBC willing to give the Big Ten if they add those two schools, I can tell you the Big Ten knows that.
Yeah.
Whatever that number is, the Big Ten knows it. So if they know that number and those schools are willing to take that number now for the chance to get more down the road, there is no sure thing where they are. So they may be, it may be, hey, the ship be sinking, as they say, and we would like a lifeboat. And if there's only $40 million a year in that lifeboat, well, it's still a lifeboat.
Well, and you wonder, like, how can you compete when everybody else in the Big Ten would be making twice as much as you are? I think they'll be able to compete with all of the guys, all of the programs that don't spend their money the right way or just collect it,
In the Big Ten?
Exactly. You're talking about, at this point, once USC and UCLA join, the teams that take it seriously, 4 or 5 teams, and really that's counting a Wisconsin, who I think Oregon and Washington would be equal to, and be able to do what they do. So, as we said before, when we're talking about Clemson brings in less money than Ohio State, but they spend more money on football. It's like how you use the money that you've got. And also, if you're going to be in a conference, choose one where not everybody really focuses all their attention on football. Like, join the Big Ten, don't join the SEC, and earn half of what the SEC does, because now you're going to be in trouble.
Right. And I don't think, they're
not going to the SEC.
The Southeastern Conference, the two teams from the Pacific Northwest would geographically, culturally, economically, in pretty much every other way, not be a great fit. With the Big Ten, it would have looked a little crazy 18 months ago, but now you've got USC, you've got UCLA. If those teams, want to have kind of travel buddies on the West Coast, and you can play those teams every year, maybe, or most, every year in every non-rev sport, where then it's just an easy flight up the coast as opposed to a cross-country flight. That maybe eases some of the concerns for those teams. There are a lot of ways in which this makes sense. I don't know that this is necessarily going to happen, but we answered a question on the show last night about a picture from the Brutus Buckeye account, or the Puddles the Duck account, who you're not supposed to call them Puddles, but whatever the Oregon's mascot is called. And it was the two of them holding, standing in Autzen Stadium. And I'm sure, Tony, they're not going to break the news of major conference realignment via an Instagram post of mascots. But also I'm looking at that and going, well, I'm looking at this a little differently than I did 24 hours ago.
It was probably just some Nike thing, like all of the Nike schools getting together. But also later on, it can become, this is a happy accident. Look what we've got here. But I'm fascinated to find out what they choose to do. And really, I don't even know if they could take, half of what everybody else, or if that's even an option. But I think the one thing, I don't think they can stay in the Pac-12 for long. Can they stay there if only Colorado leaves? And it sounds like, right now that's the only thing you're hearing about. But also, Colorado was staying as of 4 days ago.
Well, you've heard this. There have been two extremely 180-degree opposite narratives coming for months now, where Brett Yormark from the Big 12 has been talking about how we're, there may be something coming. We're looking very seriously at expanding. We're looking at Power 5 schools. And you got George Kliavkoff from the Pac-12 saying, no. We're all of our members are arm in arm in lockstep, marching into the future, and we're so sure about everything. And John Canzano, John Wilner, who have a great podcast covering the Pac-12, two guys who are as plugged in at the Pac-12 as any people in the nation, have been very much banging that same drum. Like, look, there is no indication right now they're not in lockstep. And that was probably true based on the people they were talking to. Well, now Colorado's not in lockstep. So now you wonder if everyone else is kind of going, okay, where's my life raft? I gotta get out of here while the getting's good, because there are only so many spots in the other conferences. So you may, and is Arizona having these same kinds of conversations? They may be. I mean, Arizona culturally is a basketball school much more than a football school. You look at the schools that are in the Big 12 right now. I mean, Cincinnati, Kansas. I mean, that is a good basketball league, and Arizona would be a fantastic addition to that league, and would maybe be more valuable to the Big 12 than they would be to any other league, because the Big 10 doesn't care about basketball as much as the Big 12 does. The SEC doesn't care about basketball as much as the Big 12 does. So then if Arizona moves, okay, now you're down to 8. And then if you take the San Diego State and SMU that you just didn't take, you just made a very specific point not to take them, then you're back up to 10. What's your TV deal worth then? Not as much as it was 3 weeks ago when you weren't happy with the number. This is a very non-sustainable thing.
Yeah, there's very little difference if you take the 4 corner schools out, you take Washington and Oregon out. This is the Mountain West. This is the WAC, from the 2000s, and so the TV deals, like everything is going back, I think, to the drawing board. All of the schools are going. Imagine the calls being made right now, like all of the upper deck people or Arizona State, like the kinds of calls with the trustees and what are we going to do? What are our options? What can we do? Has anybody reached out? Those sorts of things where, now you're just trying to find the chair before the music stops. And you don't want to end up in the Pac-12 chair, I don't think.
No, you don't. And you really don't want to end up in the ACC chair either. And because the ACC, we've talked about this on shows before. I'm going to give you the 30-second version of this, I promise. If you've heard this before, skip forward 30 seconds. The ACC is locked into its TV deal because the ACC locked into a long-term, relatively low-dollar TV deal about, 8 years ago, give or take, because they wanted to form the ACC network with ESPN. The deal there was they had to lock in for 20 years. So everyone there is locked in until 2036. So they have a grant of rights. If they leave, they will not get any money for their TV rights until 2036. So everyone is basically, it's a Mexican standoff, a suicide pact, however you want to talk about it. They are standing there with guns pointed at each other. No one can leave. They're locked in at a very low amount of money. The Pac-12 is locked in. Right now, the Pac-12 doesn't have any kind of a TV deal. The value of a Pac-12 TV deal is probably ticking down slightly as we go. They're
locked into poverty.
They are, they have a long-term contract, and they are not earning a living wage potentially. And there was a Twitter thread that I retweeted tonight from a guy named Frank the Tank, who was one of the original. I don't understand how this guy's an insider, but somehow he knows everything about conference realignment, like back in the Nebraska to the Big Ten days. And he had a really interesting thread on Twitter where he talked about, sorry, X.
Thank you.
He had a really interesting thread. I'm not going to say it. He had a really interesting thread on Twitter, which was about how Netflix had a couple quarters where they lost money, and it changed the way everyone looked at streaming services. And you're no longer able to just kind of throw money at stuff and go, well, we're building our audience, and it's how much money you're making. And that conversation happened at exactly the wrong time for the Pac-12, where a bunch of what they call the FANG companies, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google, who everyone has sort of projected as, these are people who are going to get into the rights game at some point and drive these rights prices up. All of them are kind of saying, nah, bro, to like the Pac-12, the Big 12, conferences that are kind of what you call a nice to have, not a must have, but a nice to have. You might be able to get a nice TV deal for the Big Ten or the SEC out of one of those companies. You can't get it for a conference that doesn't draw the way that some of the bigger conferences do. So this is all happening. Basically, the negotiations for the Pac-12 are just coming around at a bad time in history for the Pac-12. And they just went through the Larry Scott era, which was another very different, very bad era in Pac-12 history. And they're just in a bad spot, and there's not necessarily a great way out. And George Kliavkoff, I do feel bad for him because he was dealt a bad hand. He came in, and USC, UCLA are leaving, not necessarily because of anything he did, but because of the guy before him. And then because those guys are leaving, and because of the timing of things, Now things feel like they're sort of starting to spiral on the Pac-12 a little bit. And you can sort of see, I'm not saying death spiral, but if this ended up being the death spiral of the Pac-12, it wouldn't be a complete shock.
Well, when we started talking about this 3 or 4 years ago, I think we came to the conclusion that either the Pac-12, the Big 12, the ACC is no longer going to exist in terms of any kind of power play or any player at all. Like somebody's got to fall to the wayside because these teams are leaving conferences and they're going to join from somewhere, and you're seeing how that is playing out. Also, I believe I've heard some rumors about Gonzaga to the Big 12 for basketball only, which would make a ton of sense.
Well, and if Colorado doesn't have a partner from the Pac-12 who jumps, there was a report tonight, and I think this was an SI, and I will apologize to whoever wrote it. I read several different reports on, here's what's next. Someone that's been linked to them, to the Pac-12, to the Big 12, is UConn. And UConn, that is very obviously, no disrespect to Jim Mora, but that is very obviously not a football move. That is a women's basketball move. If you add Colorado and UConn, that's a big basketball move. Then maybe you do bring in Gonzaga as a basketball only or non-football member, depending on how they want to do it. I mean, then you're building a basketball super conference. And while basketball is certainly not the big Clydesdale pulling the cart in terms of revenue, you're making money off of basketball. And if you were a serious basketball conference, that's going to be a conference that people want to get, people want to have, those TV rights. And you also, if you have a conference that spans from UConn to Gonzaga, guess what you have? Remember when we talked about time zones this year with the Big Ten? You have all the time zones. So that maybe makes that potentially a bigger TV draw in terms of basketball, which then it's not going to make up for whatever your football deficit is, but it'll help.
Well, I think if you want to be the basketball conference, it kind of reminds me of owning Noon, like not Noon, but Fox Big Noon. Like it was never an outstanding time slot, but it's like, well, we're going to turn it into something. We're going to put our best games there. We're going to own that time slot, and the best ratings of every week, most weeks is that noon game. So if you're going to do something, and this is a way that you can be the best at something and also do something else well, I guess it's not a bad way to go, but it's still going to be driven by football. And right now they're the better option than the Pac-12. So anything else?
Yeah, we had a couple different comments in here. One from Yakov: Northwestern makes more TV money than Clemson and Florida State combined. That is true. That is insane, but that is true. And that's sort of what we're talking about here, where you think, how could the ACC be in trouble? How could the ACC be, on the verge of falling out of being talked about as a major conference? Well, if Northwestern's making more money than your two best teams, well, that's
who's been to the Big Ten championship game more times in the last 4 years?
That is true. We were here. We have not seen Clemson or Florida State once. That's true.
That's all I'm saying.
All right. Do we want? We got one. Pac-12 is going to crumble by year's end. I'm rooting for the Four Corners to go to the Big 12 and Big 10 nabs Oregon and Washington, so there's some continuity. It's certainly a possibility that that's how it plays out. I don't think that's necessarily the most likely scenario.
It seems too simple, right? Though?
It seems too simple, and also, you're talking about a scenario where stuff unravels very quickly, and it is certainly possible that it does. And it's just right now we're trying to anticipate what are a group of people, sitting in a room or on a conference call. Are they going to hold firm? Are they going to hold the line? Or are they going to break and run? And I don't know. I'm not going to pretend to know here. I think that is a possibility, that you have the complete unraveling. I think everyone kind of stays, and they either have, maybe they lose one more, or everyone stays and they add a San Diego State, or they add a SMU or, someone like that, and make it work. And you just kind of, you stick around. And I don't know that I feel like that's a league that's here 20 years from now in anything close to that form. But maybe you get through this, and you get to the next TV contract at 2030.
Hmm.
That's you're probably looking at like a 6-ish year TV deal ish. So you get to 2030, and then that's when you maybe have the whole college football world blow up. But I don't have a tremendous amount of confidence in the fact that the Pac-12 is going to hold it all together.
No, not at all.
All right. Do we want to do some questions on? We have gotten a ton of questions
About what?
Boy, we haven't even talked about the fact that the Ohio State-Michigan game, the idea that Ohio State's head coach floated the idea of moving the Ohio State-Michigan game up from its traditional spot at the end of the regular season.
That's not what he did, Tom. He floated the idea of talking about it. And all he's saying, like he's like as I wrote, he's hiding behind he's using the I'm not saying, I'm just saying. And you can't argue against I'm not saying, I'm just saying.
Yeah, it's Kevin and I talked about this on the episode of Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning that went up a few hours ago. It feels like this is a little preliminary to have this conversation.
Very much so.
It's just you're a little ahead of where you need to be, because the whole conceit here is if you've done away with divisions, as the Big Ten has starting in 2024, then any two teams in the Big Ten, the top two teams in the Big Ten, are going to play in the Big Ten championship game, which happens the week after the Ohio State-Michigan game. So if Ohio State and Michigan are the two top teams in the Big Ten, as they have been, I think, each of the last 2 years, then you would have Ohio State and Michigan playing in back-to-back weeks. Now, I think there's a reasonable question to ask. Is this going, number one, is this going to be that big a deal that it's worth blowing up this huge century-long tradition? Number two, is this going to happen so often that even if it is an issue, is it going to happen often enough that it's a big enough, recurring enough issue to be an issue? Because I go back to when they split up Ohio State and Michigan in the Leaders and Legends divisions, specifically because there was a chance they would be able to play in the Big Ten championship game, and they got more money from TV out of that. That never happened. Florida State and Miami, they designed the whole stupid Atlantic and Coastal conferences specifically around the fact that Florida State and Miami, these two powerhouses, juggernauts, would be meeting in this incredible rivalry game in the ACC championship game all the time, making this an incredible, valuable property. Tony, how many times has that happened?
Well, it's happened zero. And one of the reasons they forgot about certain powerhouses like a Georgia Tech, a Duke, a Pitt, a Wake Forest. So, yeah. And what is also interesting is they confirmed that there's already been talks. This has already been a conversation that is ongoing, or at least going on. I think you would be harming the game in an attempt to not harm the game in the odd years where those two teams would play. And I am hoping in these next 2 years, we do get some back-to-back games between those two schools, just so we can see, is it as bad as everybody, because we've talked about this before. I contend we don't know how we're going to react to it. We don't know how anybody's going to react to it because it's something completely foreign. It's never happened. So we don't know how we're going to handle it. And so I think so often we see you've got a solution, you're searching for, you've put in a solution where there isn't really a problem yet. And this is very preliminary, but also Ryan Day said, he's not expecting any kind of action on this. I think you see how things go in 2 years. We may find out that, yes, they do need to change something because, somebody rested the quarterback because both teams are already locked in. So they didn't want to risk, they wanted to make sure their starter, they were as healthy as possible for the game that matters more, which is the game in Indianapolis the following week. So I think, and I knew as soon as he said it, that you're going to have Michigan fans and also Ohio State fans slatching on and saying how soft he is, how weak this is. But it came from a place of, I don't want this rivalry game to be damaged. I don't want it to be lessened. So if we move it, it stays as important as it has been. However, you're doing that in case something else happens.
Right. And I don't know how much that I don't know that the Ohio State Michigan rivalry means quite the same thing if it happens on October 22nd as opposed to November 28th. I mean, first of all, think about, we talk about, not letting Michigan beat you twice. That's something that Ryan Day talked about on Wednesday at Big Ten Media Days. You can't let, that team beat you twice. When you've got Michigan and you lose to Michigan, or you're Michigan, you lose to Ohio State, and then the next week you have to go play at Maryland or at Michigan State. No Ohio State or Michigan team has had to do this in a century. What does the week after a loss in the game, what does that look like? And if you lose that game and then you bounce back and it doesn't matter, and it's a game in the middle of the season that's impactful, but it's like an Ohio State Penn State game where it's like, well, these are two good teams and this will probably play into the Big Ten Big Ten championship race, but we don't know exactly how yet. I would argue that has a pretty substantial impact on how significant the Ohio State Michigan game is.
I would say you could also ask what happens the week after a big win, and what kind of letdown is there dealing with that. I mean, we saw the letdown against Florida after the 2006 Michigan win, and maybe the 2013 Big Ten championship game, although that was a pretty decent Michigan State team. So I think there are several factors there. That's why I asked Ryan Day, hey, why not? How do you feel about opening the season with Michigan? To which is the first thing he said is, whew. And then something like, I'm only focused on Indiana now. Then he finished by saying, but that would be crazy.
It would be crazy. And you get to the point where you get early enough in the season. And, we've talked about Ohio State versus Notre Dame last year. It was week 1. You don't really know what you have. I mean, now we talk about, Ohio State, Michigan saving stuff all season for each other. Well, you can save stuff all summer for each other and break it out week 1. You have an issue where that becomes Florida State, Miami. I mean, to use them as an example for the second time, it becomes Florida State, Miami, where it's like, yeah, these are two big teams. Look, it's a helmet game. And, sure, it's a meaningful game, but there's still 11. And then by the time 11 weeks left, and by the time you get to the end of the season, then it doesn't mean anything anymore. Super chat from Jordan Kapler. Aside from asking who the starting quarterback will be, what is one question you would like to ask Ryan Day, knowing you'll get an honest answer?
Oh, wow. Boy, that's something that requires more thought than just popping it up on the screen. But I know one of the questions I did ask him today is just how much more time they spend dealing with off the field stuff. Like, I would like to know, just how much of that time, how much of your day is about that, and how annoying is it? Like, the annoyance level of dealing with all of that stuff, be it donors, and you always have had to deal with donors, but now it's even crazier because now you're asking more people for more money, and something to do with just the time aspect, or maybe something to do with some Michigan things, and maybe the true feelings on Jim Harbaugh, perhaps.
Yeah, if we could get some truth serum into Jim Harbaugh and Ryan Day and get some real honest assessments of each other's coaching abilities, and I
do think tomorrow Jim Harbaugh will be like, I don't want to move that game. No way. There's no way I want to move that game.
I
just because Ryan Day said we should talk about it.
I think the question,
even if he would want to play it in September, he will say no.
I think the question is whether Jim Harbaugh is Machiavellian enough to really say something crazy and double down and double down and double down and make that the story in such a way that, I don't know, whatever else people might have wanted to ask Jim Harbaugh about 12 hours ago might no longer be the story. I don't know that I think he's Machiavellian enough to pull that off, but you know what? If he does, God bless. I am in for a day of hashtag discourse with Jim Harbaugh. If whatever he wants to talk about, if he wants to talk about it, let's talk about it, because I think there's a lot of interesting things we could talk to Jim Harbaugh about tomorrow.
Well, what if the questions are like, hey, Jim, the 4-game suspension, and it's in that realm, and then he's like, did you guys hear what Ryan Day said yesterday? Let me just, do you mind if I just go on a tangent here, and we'll get back to your question. and then just go off on that, and then say something to where there has to be a follow up, and then say something else where there's a follow up on that. Oh, sorry, my 45 minutes are up. We've got to go. What was your? We'll walk and talk. Actually, we can't. I've got to go.
Northwestern's coach tried to run the ball control press
He sure
conference
did.
during the first 15 minutes of his time today. That
Did a good job.
Did a pretty good job. Didn't quite get there, but did a pretty good job. But yeah, I think that's going to be interesting. I mean, this is maybe the most interesting Big Ten media days I can remember, because you came here expecting to talk about, you know, the football, you know, hey, Ohio State, Michigan. Did Ryan Day get a question about the fact that Michigan is favored to win the Big Ten? I don't think he did in 45 minutes.
I think there was
maybe one. I came here thinking, oh boy, the big story is going to be, you know, the tables have turned. Michigan is the favorite in the Big Ten. One question on that. And then you got all this, you know, and then that's what Ryan Day is talking about. You got the Northwestern thing. You've got the Jim Harbaugh suspension thing. There was a report today out of Front Office Sports about PJ Fleck, and, you know, making PJ Fleck sound like he might be kind of in the same kind of conversation with the Northwestern thing. I mean, all this stuff is all happening. And oh, by the way, maybe college football is going to explode because of something Colorado did. And it's so funny because you're there, and we're sitting in the media workroom. And we're two of the last people in there, and there's a guy way over in the corner, and it's Pete Thamel. And you had been in work doing something else, and I said, "Oh, there's the guy that blew up college football today." And you're like, "What? What happened? What?" And you know, he's like walking out and just, you know, hey, and I don't know, said something to him about you know, eventful day today or something.
Good job ruining the sport. I think was the correct
yeah,
words.
something along those lines. And it's just one thing after another. And tomorrow's a whole new day. What the heck is going to happen tomorrow? I mean, this has been a really, really fun week, and we've only been here 24 hours.
Well, and we'll get to the super chat here.
Yeah.
But like the PJ Fleck thing came up, and then people shot it down within like 30 minutes. So who knows what's going to happen tomorrow, where, you know, pops back up, and that's the time frame of the news cycle right now.
Mm-hmm.
You got 30 minutes, and then we're moving on. It's like we're all run by Domino's Pizza or something.
I don't have a transition here from Domino's Pizza to this super chat. So Omar Austin, gun to head, watch Kevin Noon belly dance in a two-piece, or watch him get a Brazilian wax. Well, I can tell you, I've already done one of those things, and
I did the other.
Belly dance, it was the truffle shuffle.
it was the truffle shuffle, as Kevin says. So
no, it's just gonna be one of those things where he's like, I want my answer, so you do have to answer.
Yeah. I think I'm going to go with Kevin doing the truffle shuffle. I think I've got to go with that. My reaction would also be like, what was his name? The truffle shuffle kid. What was his name?
Chunk.
Chunk. Yeah. My reaction would be much like Chunk in the balcony of the theater, where he makes the throw up sound and then throws throw up down over the people below him. That would be my reaction to Kevin doing the truffle shuffle. But we're about making memories here, people, and I think that would be a memorable experience.
Well, I don't think you can get it out of your memory. So I would also say the truffle shuffle. Not that we need to continue on with this, but we do need to answer the super chat. I almost dared to say, I don't know that there's anything you could put out there as an option against the Brazilian wax, but I also don't want to challenge people to put options out there.
No. That's a $50 super chat if that's the good of the option. The
Brazilian wax?
Yeah.
Or the options?
No, if the Brazilian wax is the good option, that's at least a $50 super chat. Scrolling through.
No offense, Kev.
I'm just sort of scrolling through questions here. If Kevin wants to punch something up, he certainly
Go
can.
ahead
But
and call for him, and I'll run over. I get here just to keep it light. The Jeremiah Yoder. Between the two of you, who wins a Krispy Kreme donut eating contest?
I love me some Krispy Kreme. Oh, Mark Gibler says him.
Mark's, and you know what?
It's a sneaky one you never suspect.
Yeah, you look at the hot dog eating contest, and it's never the guys who look like they played offensive
Hot
tackle.
dog eating contest.
It's never the guys who look like they play hot dog eating contest. Yeah, I think Mark might be a sneaky choice here.
I think Krispy Kremes are one of the best tasting foods in the world. I think I don't know at what point you could just like stop, or how many would be too many. Like I've never gone to that point, like 3, and then it's like the guilt sets in, and you're like, I can't go beyond this. This is but then it's like, oh, but we do have milk in the fridge. Okay, one more.
The milk's going to go bad in like a week and a half.
I'm
You got to
doing
get
this
rid
for
of
the
it.
household. But Mark, how many Krispy Kremes could you do in a sitting?
I've never pushed myself to that limit. I could easily kill a 12 pack.
All right, so I'm hearing Super Chat Fiesta. We need to do this. Mark needs to do a Krispy Kreme eating contest where how much do we need to get in Super Chats for you to try and knock down 2 dozen super
2 dozen.
2 dozen. Yeah.
Jeez.
2 dozen, yeah. Or 18 or do we need people to like we're going to pledge this like it's
200 I'll do 200 in super chats. I'll try to eat 2 dozen.
$200 in Super Chats. Mark will try and eat 2 dozen Krispy Kreme donuts. Listen, if we want to do this, do we want to see if we can raise $200 in Super Chats right now? I don't. Maybe we make a separate event about this.
We need some sad music, some Sarah McLachlan music.
Yeah.
For just $200 a day.
I was just looking over at the TV, and the Baltimore Orioles record is 62-39. I'm like, why does that sound familiar? It's like, that was the 2018 Ohio State Michigan score.
I definitely believe I could do a dozen Krispy Kremes, and I probably wouldn't feel great about it, but
I bet you wouldn't.
You just don't make me full.
yeah, exactly. Now if you wanted to eat Krispy Kremes like they do with the hot dog eating contest, and you just dunk it in water and just squeeze it, it's going to be the size of a donut hole. Max.
I
Yeah.
don't want to do it that way.
Yeah. No.
I want to do it straight.
Coward. I do think they are the best donuts, so I love them. They're great.
Is there something that you feel like you could win a contest? You would feel very confident that you could win a contest against anyone else here. And this is the
Like 1,000
anyone else
different
here.
contests. Euchre, yes.
Things you wouldn't get arrested for. Some kind of eating contest. Like I feel like I could probably take you and Kevin and Mark at wings, the traditional wings. I could probably take you guys in a wing eating contest.
Probably.
I don't, but I don't know that I could necessarily like. I don't know that I would feel particularly optimistic about my chances in like hot dog eating contest or donuts or something like that.
Chocolate milkshake. Because then you're just guzzling it like you're downing it like a beer. Or
I feel like anyone who tried to have more than one chocolate milkshake would pretty much just black out.
it's just no 140-ounce chocolate milkshake. That's all. That's all.
Oh boy, I will trust your judgment on that one. I will
See, that's the one where you make everybody else fold, and that's how you win.
Yeah, I will
But
already.
I have now I have to deal with this 40-ounce milkshake that I have in my
All
belly.
right, we got a couple super chats here. Let's start with Ryan Dawes. The Oregon picture online is so much more confusing now. I have been able to listen. I guess I haven't been able to listen, so apologies if you guys covered this already. We mentioned it earlier because the Oregon picture, just for people who maybe are just jumping on now or weren't listening last night, there was a picture of Brutus Buckeye and the Duck from Oregon, the mascot from Oregon, standing at Autzen Stadium, like looking at the scoreboard, and it was just kind of like, and they put it out, and it was like, huh.
And it said big things coming.
It said big things coming, and 24 hours ago, everything was sort of status quo with the Pac-12, and all the Pac-12 people were saying everything was status quo, and all the Big Ten people were saying, well, there's no real reason to think that, the Big Ten had their opportunity to take Washington, Oregon, and respectfully declined. So what would have changed now? And the answer was nothing had changed now. Well, now here we are 24 hours later, and now Colorado's going to the Big 12, and how much does that change? How much is that change Oregon's price point to come to the Big Ten? And the answer might be substantially, because oh boy, now our neighborhood is no longer, our neighborhood might be about to fall into the ocean. So maybe we don't want to do that. So maybe we don't want to stay here. We want to go somewhere else, and we'll take a little less to go somewhere else. The part of this that is hardest for me to reconcile is this news gets broken on a mascot Instagram account. Like, you think about the reason this stuff doesn't come out is because it's kept in the extremely, extremely tight group of people, where it's a lot of times the head football coach might not know. The athletic director doesn't necessarily know, because these are decisions getting made at the university president level. So Puddles the Duck is going to be the one who knows and finds out, and that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
That's how Brett Murphy got his start.
Puddles doesn't wear a trench coat. Super chat from Jordan Cowboy. Did you guys have any pregame traditions when you were students at Ohio State?
I did, in fact. No, because I was one of the only students at Ohio State who wanted to watch the game and remember it and experience it and not be hammered for it. Because you know what? There's time, as Kenny Rogers, to paraphrase Kenny Rogers, there'll be time enough for hammering once you get home.
There
What
will
we
be
would do now, the
time
tradition.
enough for drinking when the football's done.
Perfect.
That would have been much better.
But the tradition was, we would walk from our apartment off campus and have a sub at Charlie's
Mhm.
and a big sub because you don't know when you're going to eat again, and then walk our bloated selves, to the stadium, and that was it. And then afterwards, we would go watch the game on tape, and VHS, and get the VCR. And if we forgot to record it, oh boy.
I also remember recording games to watch afterwards. Not necessarily immediately after. We would go to
We would also go to
after the
parties and
games. We'd go
stuff,
to
but-
B-dubs and stuff on High Street. Yeah, before the game, I've never been a real big, hey, it's 8 a.m. Let's crack a beer. That's not really ever been my thing. I have always enjoyed the walk to the stadium,
Yes, a
especially the walk to the stadium on a day when
little cool.
it's like sweatshirt weather.
Mhm.
When I worked at Channel 4, if you don't know where Channel 4 in Columbus is, it's maybe a mile and a half up on Olentangy River Road. There was an old sports anchor there who would take one game a year and would walk down like the sweatshirt game.
Mhm.
He would walk down. It was just, that was a cool tradition. But yeah, I would always just kind of walk around campus, especially on those kind of cooler fall days. I like that. I was, like I said, I was never like a big, let's go to Outer Inn and have 17 beers before the game.
No, sometimes afterwards, sit on the porch there. But we would also, I enjoyed the walk. We almost went to a crew game at the Shoe one spring because we hadn't taken the walk in so long. That's how desperate we were to walk from North Fourth to campus.
Listen, I don't want to say I'm going to go crazy if I do this, but I might go see a soccer game on purpose.
But you'd cut down 15th, go down front row where you have the music blaring, it smells like beer, and then you're on campus.
All right, so follow up on our food eating contest thing. Who wins at eating well done steaks with ketchup? Is this even a question?
Kevin.
Feels like the answer is 1-0.
Well, here's the thing: are we dunking it in water again? That's the question. Dunk it in water, squeeze it, eat it.
That's the worst thing I've ever heard. Jordan wants to know chicken nuggets and ketchup eating contest.
Why eat those quickly? Why not savor that?
That feels like that's probably you, unless my 10-year-old enters
that's
that contest. Which
You get a good nugget, that's a 3 dunker. You tell me you can do a 1 dunk and eat it?
former Tennessee and current Arkansas State coach Butch Jones chimes in. All right, folks, only 15 likes. Might as well call ourselves TCU fans.
Ooh.
Need to hit the like button if you're watching. Got another one. Omar Austin wants to know, did Kevin give you guys the money I sent for beer? Well, I'm drinking water, so apparently not.
I have not heard from Kevin.
Kevin who?
He said, I got to run to the bus stop, and we haven't heard from him since.
He probably
Since the super chat money doesn't go into my pocket, there's nothing for me to hand out.
No, but we have been taken care of for sure. Don't worry about that.
I lost who it was, but someone just said, El Suzabo first wants to know, how dare we go live during the U.S. women's soccer game?
Well, there is that.
Yeah, they're losing last I saw. So
Oh, really?
yeah,
Well,
they were down 1-0.
They only have to come out of the
1-0, as you say in soccer, to the Netherlands, which they wear wooden shoes. How are you losing to them? That doesn't seem possible.
A couple of kicks to the shin, and you're done, though.
That's true. So I do want to get. Let's see. There was a question in here about recruiting. It was about the guy Nigel Glover, who is the Northwestern
True freshman.
true freshman. Yeah, signee who is visiting Ohio State as a potential transfer, given yada 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 that has happened at Northwestern. The question was essentially, if he wants to, if he has an offer and wants to come, is this like if he gets the green light to commit, that he's in, that he will jump immediately? Mark, do you have any sense for that?
He's supposed to visit Michigan
Mhm.
after. Now,
So-
they'll do everything in their power to stop that.
Yeah. So he is supposed to visit Michigan after he visits Ohio State, and is he a take? Is the sense that he's
I'm pretty sure.
yeah, so the sense is that he, if he wanted to commit during the Ohio State visit, Ohio State would accept the commitment. That's sort of the sense right now. So then if you see him go to Michigan, then the answer was no, not necessarily on at least one of those. And as far as scholarship numbers, since I'm sure people are wondering about that, Ohio State had been over for quite a while. We got a couple pieces of news from Ryan Day on Wednesday. One is that Avery Henry, who was the offensive lineman who had a cancer diagnosis last fall and missed last season as he was getting cancer treatment. He is now cancer-free, which is wonderful. He's in remission. However, the treatment that he underwent basically made it impossible for him to continue to play football. The risk was too great based on how hard that is on your body. So the doctors were not going to clear him. He had to take a medical retirement. Grant Jutant, another offensive lineman from a couple of years ago, he also took a medical retirement. So that there was some concern, Ohio State's way over the number. Now Ohio State's, depending on how you want to count it and who you want to count, they're at 85, 86, maybe 84. So there's a little bit of a gray area there in terms of who is actually on scholarship, and is everyone who transferred in this year immediately on scholarship? Is that maybe going to start next year? So we always say the numbers will work themselves out. The numbers will work themselves out. So, and if they do end up taking this Northwestern transfer, then the numbers will probably work themselves out there as well.
Yeah, for sure. And again, we don't always know who's on scholarship. Xavier Johnson was on scholarship for a year before anybody knew about it because Ryan Day doesn't like to talk about it. I don't think head coaches like talking about who is on scholarship or who isn't necessarily, because then we keep track of it. And so the less we know, the better they feel about, yes, this guy had a scholarship for 2 semesters, then we had to pull it. And it's like, if people know that, like, oh, you took a scholarship, why'd you take a scholarship? And it's like, well, we needed it. So the less we know about that, the better I think the coaches feel about that.
Yeah, and there was I think it was Mitch Rossi who scored a touchdown against Rutgers a couple of years ago, and I put something on Instagram about, hey, walk on Mitch Rossi, and had a bunch of players in the replies like, he's been on scholarship for a while. I was like, well, nobody told us. Sorry. So yeah, so that's you wouldn't think a number like that could have wiggle room, and yet it seems to sort of have wiggle room. Follow up from Hummus Hero. What is a soccer? We have looks like we have another one. Omar Austin, sleeper pick for breakout player of the year. And Mark, any guesses on a surprise commitment? We'll let Mark kind of puzzle over the next surprise commitment. Sleeper pick for breakout player of the year.
That's a in-depth question, because it's not just your pick for breakout player of the year, which is a separate question.
Yeah.
This is like an inception question.
Yeah.
Like, you've got to have a dream inside the dream.
I gotta say, this is someone I certainly would have been sleeping on 12 hours ago, but then Ryan Day was asked twice about the right tackle position, and twice he said Luke Montgomery's name. And with the understanding that it's completely ludicrous to think that a true freshman is going to start at offensive tackle. Nuts, crazy, ridiculous. Ryan Day said his name twice when talking about the right tackle position. And, as there were sort of follow-ups on that, Day said, like, look, I never played this year. But if you're talking about him, then he gets into that conversation about potential breakout players, and certainly would qualify as a sleeper. So I'll go with him. No, you're not allowed to pick Sonny Styles, just to answer your question in advance.
I will say Ryan Day told all of the early enrollees sometime after spring and before, like sometime this summer, I consider you guys sophomores now. Like, you are no longer freshmen. I consider you sophomores.
The NFL doesn't. So just to be clear, the NFL does
And
not consider
technically,
you sophomores.
Ryan Day also does not. I sort of consider you sophomores. I thought it was interesting to hear Ryan Day talk about Lorenzo Styles Jr. and all the skill set that he has and how he could possibly help on special teams. And because we kind of viewed this as a redshirt year kind of thing, and it doesn't sound like maybe that's actually going to be the case. But a under the radar breakout guy. How about is Kenyatta Jackson under the radar? and we've talked about it as a possible breakout guy. But when Ryan Day was mentioning the defensive line, and he's talking about Mike Hall and Tyreek and JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer and Ty Hamilton, the sixth name was Kenyatta Jackson.
I think Kenyatta Jackson is both someone who is more likely to be a breakout player this year, just because he's been around a year.
Mhm.
That's a position. Defensive end is a position where it's easier to get on the field in your first year than offensive tackle. Plus, it's his second year and Luke Montgomery's first. So he's kind of got almost a 2-year head start on Luke Montgomery in that way. But also, when you talk about defensive ends on the team, you're talking about the big three, really. You're talking about JT Tuimoloau, you're talking about Jack Sawyer, you're talking about Caden Curry. And it feels like there's sort of a gap in most people's minds after those three. There's probably a gap after 2, and there's another gap after 3. So I think he probably would count as, an under-the-radar kind of sleeper candidate to be a breakout person. But I think also he's, based on the way Ryan Day talked about it, he talked about he's 250 pounds. I think he talked about him being like an NFL body.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you were a second-year player, that sounds like someone who's ready to maybe make an impact.
And going into this spring and after the season, we talked about Caden Curry being that number 3. From the way coaches talk, and sometimes they don't say names and sometimes they do say names, I've heard Kenyatta Jackson's name more than Caden Curry's.
Mhm.
And we didn't hear Caden Curry's name mentioned necessarily by Ryan Day. So I don't know that it isn't that Kenyatta Jackson isn't in that top 3 right
Mhm.
now. And, the ideal, it would be a top 4, with Caden Curry and Kenyatta Jackson both being in there. Top 5, Amari Abor at some
Mhm.
point.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll go with Kenyatta Jackson, and I'll feel okay about that.
So
Mark's question.
so Mark's question,
Surprisingly.
surprise commitment.
Well, if it was a surprise, how would I know?
Don't use your logic on us.
Would you be surprised if Aaron Scott committed this weekend?
No.
So no, Aaron Scott, a commitment on July 30th would not be
Yeah,
a surprise for Mark.
I think we kind of know what the guys are in 24. I would watch. I think that there's a few guys in 25 I would watch in the short term. That group from Connecticut, Matty Augustine, Ethan Long, are coming up here this week. I think those 2 guys are actually leading Ohio State. We haven't really had a chance. They just got offered like last month, so we haven't really had a chance to maybe go in depth on those guys yet. I could see something happening with at least one of those guys not too far down the road. And then maybe looking a little further out is Nashawn Montgomery, a 25 receiver out of Florida, who I think everyone was talking about. Jamie French, who just committed to Alabama. But Nashawn Montgomery is probably a guy they lead for right now.
Are they going to take a step back in the 25 class with receivers, do you think? Is there going to be a little ebb and flow there? Is it going to be another 22 perhaps?
It's going to be hard to repeat what they've done the last 2 years, but if we're sitting here and we're talking about people like Nashawn Montgomery, then it's kind of like, here we go again. Some of these guys are in on, so logic would tell you at some point they're going to have a transition year, or a year that maybe has a couple of Ohio kids in it to just kind of keep the portal empty at that position. But Hartline seems to beat the odds more often than not.
Yeah, Chris Henry's teammate is a 25, is right.
Yeah, Quentin Simmons, you got Jackson Wiley,
Yeah.
you got a couple options in Ohio.
I'll throw a name out in 24 that, what happens if they suddenly get back involved like a Jordan Seaton or somebody like
Kevin,
that?
talk to us.
They are involved with Jordan Seaton. I see that kind of comes down to what would be a surprise. They're in his top 2 or 3.
That's been a name that's been around for a while and went away. Jordan
That's gonna
Seaton.
be a fall recruitment.
I think the most exciting thing, and I'm assuming everyone has heard everything Mark was saying. Mark is kind of a little far away, but the 2 2025 Connecticut prospects.
Yeah.
4-star safety Ethan Long, 3-star offensive tackle Matty Augustine, both much like 2023 Ohio State signee Miles Walker from the mean streets of Greenwich.
There you go. You want the tough kids.
Ryan Day getting the Mean Street posse back together. First of all, I can't tell you how delighted I am that I get to make Southwestern Connecticut jokes and, yes, it's professional wrestling jokes, but it is a very niche Southwestern Connecticut.
It would be like getting Shane McMahon and Triple H.
So yeah, it is a those are some good names to kind of keep in mind.
Mhm.
And yes, as Mark has pointed out, yeah, the one that that's a surprise. How would you know? That is a very fair point. But yeah, good answers there. Some good options there for you. Just scrolling through
So
here.
that's Omar, when
Oh
that's-
yes, sorry. The one from Omar that I started and didn't finish. Please don't tell my wife I'm blowing all the grocery money on super chats. I mean, blowing the money implies that you're wasting it, which I don't think
you are.
I don't think there's anything to tell your wife about. I
I'll,
mean,
I'll donate my uneaten Krispy Kremes to his family.
yes, Mark will donate the uneaten Krispy Kremes when he's. And now I really want to see.
It's gonna be 23 and a half. He's like, here's a half a donut for your family.
I think the time to do this is while you're out at the hotel check-in day on Sunday,
Gosh,
and it's 95 degrees and humid.
just sweat
And
and
Mark's
glaze.
full of 24 donuts and just glaze coming out his ears.
He's sitting over on the bench,
Oh,
over in the bushes.
Lukewarm 2% milk.
you know what's milk is gonna
Milk
make
was
you
a
feel,
bad choice.
milk is gonna make you feel a lot better there. Yeah, I think frankly, I think that merits $300 for the super chats there. I'm just gonna say that.
You know what? That might finally get rid of people just showing up to take pictures of the players checking in, because we're all just gonna be taking pictures of Mark powering down these 24 donuts.
Oh man, yeah, that's
We're all gonna
Um,
be chanting, and then the players are gonna get in on it. It's like, what's going on? And Kyle McCord's like, what's going on? We're watching Givler eat, 2 dozen donuts. Like, I'm in. And then we were all just, there rooting you on. And then here comes Mickey Marotti's like, normally I would be against this. However,
It just me. Tim says, "Did everyone shake their head when Tim May asked Ryan Day who's his backup quarterback?" I
laughed.
gotta tell you, I walked over to Tim after that session was over, and said, "Man, it was a heck of a try." That was, if you were not watching, Ryan Day always will get asked, "Who do you have a sense for who your starter is going to be?" And so Tim took a different tack. He asked, "Do you have a sense who your backup's going to be?" He's like, "Well, no." Ryan Day did not fall for the trap. Unsurprisingly, Ryan Day smarter than the average bear. But yeah, it was a worthwhile effort.
Breaking news: Ryan Day really, really likes Lincoln Keenholz.
Yes. Oh yeah.
How just how advanced he is. How he's just come in and he's professional already, and they knew he was going to be a competitive guy. And everything they liked about him as a recruit, they are seeing now that he is here. So we'll know what's going on.
Tony gets to read the next super chat.
If Omar's going to spend all of his grocery money, you got to read it.
So if Mark's eating all the donuts, I'm going to edit this and say who's eating all of the donut holes. I mean, I don't know.
That's such a good edit.
I don't know that. I don't know. I mean, are we talking about Timbits? Are we talking about?
I do think
what did Dunkin' Donuts call their donut holes?
Munchkins.
Munchkins. Yeah.
I do think it is kind of a ripoff that when you buy a dozen donuts, you don't also get the donut holes with them.
Mm.
They're double dipping on that. I'm paying for the entire donut, not just the circular part. I want the middle as well. But how many? Now, if I've never, does Krispy Kreme even do donut holes? I don't think I've never seen them. But you want to talk about a snack food that you could just destroy like 200 of. Like now we're getting into like, I know you heard me say, give me all of the donut holes.
I know you think you heard me say I want
But
a lot
I
of
want
donut holes.
All of the
Yes.
donut holes from Krispy Kreme.
I'm just looking at the video feed right now, and it looks like we're podcasting from inside like a lemon. It's the lighting in this hotel room is
I was going to
magnificent.
bring lights with me, but that would.
Nah, it's too much work.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah. It is. It's a whole mood, and I don't know if you can tell. Right behind us, I don't think that's the NCAA headquarters right behind us, but
No, that's,
the NCAA headquarters are like right there. We had talked about potentially doing a show live from outside the NCAA headquarters and talking about the brave and noble NCAA Warriors. Given some of the things we'll be talking about tomorrow at Big Ten Media Days. Jeremiah wants to know how many days until Ohio State plays Indiana, and the answer to that is, let me check.
Don't forget to add one on from tomorrow's show.
It is. From Thursday's show, it's 37 days. So from technically right now, it's 38 days. So,
but we're getting there. I
Yeah.
mean, you can now kind of just just in your head do, hey, that's 5 weeks and
Tomorrow
a few days.
is 1 week till camp.
Yeah, 1 week till fall camp and only 4 days and 4 weeks and 2 days till week 0 and
Yes.
5 weeks on Thursday from the Thursday night of week 1.
Now,
where
is
it's
this
really?
The first weekend where there's football every weekend until like February, or is that next weekend?
I think it's next weekend.
So
I
this
think
is
it's
the
August
last weekend.
4th or so. It might be this might be like the Hall of Fame game.
August 3rd is the Hall of Fame game with
Okay,
the
so-
Browns.
Okay.
So this is the last weekend without some sort of football.
Yes.
Although I've been watching some CFL.
You know, I
Those
saw
Red
someone
Blacks.
I saw someone tweet that, and I thought, well, there's CFL, and I mean, if you're counting NFL preseason, I think you need to count CFL. And if you're counting CFL, you really need to count XFL and
I was
whatever the other one is.
I was watching a game the other day, and it went into overtime. And I tried reading and following along on the overtime rules, but I couldn't. This is some sort of Continental Basketball Association scorekeeping where you'll get points for this quarter. You play like 2 full possessions, and it was a good game, but I don't know how you win.
Jordan Kapler says Tom's been in TV too long doing live edits. Much the same. Omar Austin, super chat. Who said donut holes?
Yep.
I did. Just to
Yeah,
be clear.
Tom did, yes.
I did. Yes.
Mika's asked this question a couple of times. Do we offer Raphael Green and Tucker Caddis in 25?
I think those guys probably will need to camp next year. I think they're kind of right on the outside looking in at this point.
Okay, so I assume people heard that, but probably camp type guys who may need to camp next summer to potentially earn an offer.
Is it kind of dangerous to rely on that year, going into your senior year, for a school to rely on those camp guys on the offensive line, right? And like you want to be set by that point.
Yeah, I mean, you want to have most of your group together. Maybe you're looking for like one guy to fill things out. But and if they have a great junior season, maybe that changes. But I just think right now they're kind of on the outside.
Because when you take a guy heading into a senior year on camp, that's like we have nothing else and no other irons in fire. And this is Antonio Underwood, Tommy Brown, Chris Carter type of thing where
Brian Bobek.
well, he was at least a recruit.
He was 5'4".
That's fine. He played center. You don't need to be 6 foot. You're just snapping the ball.
Can I read the most a place in time comment I think we've ever gotten
All right.
from our buddy Peace Clan? I caught a Smash Mouth concert in the Cooker parking lot
What?
the night before a Michigan game once. That was a crazy night. I can almost peg this down to the hour that this happened because, boy, the Smash Mouth
Mm-hmm.
Cooker
Mm.
Venn diagram
Right.
there. That is a narrow window of time.
You know what is crazy? This is the second time we've talked about Cooker today.
It is the second time we
It
talked
is.
about Cooker
I
today.
haven't talked about Cooker in 10 years, but two times in one day. It's got to be a record for Cooker, at least in the last decade.
Feels like this is conclusive proof that we're living in a simulation. Is that was your takeaway, or was it, man, I missed their biscuits? Because those are the only two possible takeaways.
I honestly
there.
remember nothing about Cooker other than, as I said before, when the stadium went up in Glendale, all they had was a Cooker.
Mhm.
Question for you guys: Cooker or Cheddar's?
I don't know that I ever went to a Cheddar's. Cooker was solid, and it was not anything. I will always say Chili's because once Applebee's got rid of the smell of chicken, why go to Applebee's?
I want my baby back, ribs.
Anyway, there was from the. Do you think this is the actual Dr. Pepper? A comment from Dr. Pepper: try an Amish donut, 1,000 times better than any others I have tried.
Amish donut, is it cake donut or is it yeast donut? Because
That feels like that's got to be a cake
I
donut,
would
right?
assume cake.
Cake?
probably.
I mean,
Cake feels like the traditional donut, right? I'm interested.
you know what I don't like? I know people, and if they want to sponsor us, I don't like all of these fancy donuts. I don't need big fancy cake donuts. I don't need fancy yeast donuts. Glazed donut is plenty fine. A chocolate donut is plenty fine. I don't need some sort of design that you're just going to upcharge me for. I don't need sprinkles. I don't need jam in my donut. I just want a donut.
Get out.
If you feel like you're getting ripped off by not having the donut hole in there,
Mhm.
making it a jam donut solves that problem because then there's no hole missing in the middle of a jam donut.
I just don't need the jam. The jam though.
I'm just trying to. I mean, you can.
Although I honestly could not tell you last time I had a jelly donut.
That's kind of sad. I do want to get to our
So get to
one.
the Florida Buckeye, and then we have a super chat as well.
Okay, and
I want to go back to the jelly donut.
Okay, so real quick, Florida Buckeye. Oh, now I know why Kevin wanted to read this. Buckeye Huddle, thanks for the excellent coverage. Agreed. Great to hear Mark and Kevin in the house, along with Tom and Tony. I mean, reasonable people can disagree, I suppose. So yeah, thank you for watching along. Real quickly, our good buddy Treasure the Torah. I saw this earlier, and I want to hit this real quick. Tom, realistically, what do you think the Ohio State's record is this year? I think you're looking at. I mean, with my standard caveat that you never pick a team to go undefeated because it's unrealistic to. The odds are strongly in favor that you're not going to go undefeated. So I'm not picking 12-0. I think the question is 11-1 or 10-2. There's a possibility they go 12-0. There's a scenario where they go 9-3. I don't really see 8-4 as a realistic possibility. I think you've got 4 games you could lose, really, in terms of talent. Where it's anywhere close, and that's Notre Dame, Wisconsin, Penn State, Michigan, and then you can throw at Purdue in there because at Purdue is always a little bit of a wild card. But I don't think Ohio State's going worse than 3-2 in that stretch. So I'm going to say 11-1, but 10-2 wouldn't surprise me. I think the likelihood of them in terms of records, most likely to least likely is 11-1, 10-2, 12-0, 9-3, 8-4. That's probably the order that I would kind of pick those in.
All right, that's totally fair, Tom.
Omar Austin says G.I. Joe or Thundercats. I'm bored. I couldn't tell. Do you have a strong opinion, G.I. Joe versus Thundercats?
No, G.I. Joe. Now, I never collected G.I. Joe as a Star Wars guy, but I did watch G.I. Joe. Much better show than Thundercats. Thundercats totally unrealistic. Cat people? Really? No offense to the cat people.
I didn't watch a lot of G.I. Joe as a kid.
You can tell.
Yeah,
That's why
and
you have no moral compass.
Yeah. You don't even know what half the battle is. It's knowing, Tom.
Yeah, I did know that. I was trying to come up with something clever and not coming up with anything. So that's all right. I watched more Thundercats than I did G.I. Joe as a kid. I was not a huge I didn't have any kind of Thundercats merch.
Yeah.
I had more He-Man stuff than I did anything in that era. That was more of He-Man would have been my pick of any of these things.
My problem with the Thundercats is they were on the same time as the second showing of Transformers. So they were not going to make the list.
No, it was all about G-Force, which Voltron completely ripped off.
We're talking mid 80s, Kevin. Stay out of the early 80s. Nobody here is
I'm
old enough to
sorry,
understand
no,
that.
Maybe my younger brother should be producing the show then. I mean, we're about the same age.
Is he? Your younger brother is about the same age. All right.
As you guys, not me.
Okay. From Aiden Parample, whose icon is a block M. So
Oh, here we go. All right.
the
Let's
question
do
is,
this.
I want to know if he can afford to lose to Michigan again, Ryan Day. If Ryan Day can afford to lose to Michigan again. This was during our conversation
Right.
about honest, get an honest answer out of Ryan.
Yeah, and my answer to this is always what else is happening with the season for the Buckeyes. And if they're in the playoffs, yeah, you can absolutely afford to lose to Michigan. It sucks. You don't want to do it, but you're not going to get fired for making the playoffs. And now 10-2 and out of the playoffs, you are in a situation where you better win in Ann Arbor in 2024. But again, you could be saved by the playoffs. So I don't even think you need to win the game anymore. That's what I'm saying. Move it to October.
I do think my view of Ryan Day's status when it comes to needing to win the Michigan game in this calendar year and this year, I think that changed a lot when I saw Ohio State lose at home by a significant margin. And that was a close game later than you would expect based on the final score, but they lost that game by 20 points, whatever it was, at home, still made the college football playoff, still got to the point where, coulda, woulda, shoulda, beat Georgia. And if they beat Georgia, they win the national championship. So if they beat Georgia, they win the national championship. Can we stipulate that for the moment?
Yeah.
Because the TCU team that lost by 58 points to Georgia was probably not going to be 8+ touchdowns better
Yeah,
against Ohio
just
State.
because you beat Michigan doesn't mean you're all that good.
Right.
He said it. He said it. Tom said it.
Anyway, I think if you're at the point where one field goal goes in, or one penalty gets called, or one safety doesn't fall down, or whatever, you pick your one what if. You're one play away from beating Georgia and then winning the national championship without beating Michigan. And so I think there's if you make the playoff this year, that's kind of the new goal. And they have team goals, and the team goals are beat Michigan, win the Big Ten, win the national championship. If you make the college football playoff, it's kind of like, you're winning your division, you make the playoffs in the NFL. You're not going to get fired for winning the division and making the playoffs in the NFL every year. If you're making the playoffs in the college football, especially in a 4-team field right now, that's kind of the goal. And then you get there and then you see what happens. I think he could lose to Michigan this year and not have a huge issue, even if they don't make the playoff. Because I think last year they've made the playoff 3 out of the last 4 years in a 4-team field. It's only going to get easier to make the playoff next year. And I don't think Gene Smith really wants to fire Ryan Day because things are going reasonably well.
I do wonder how long making the playoffs is all you need to do, because I don't think it stays that way at Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
Here's something I want to ask you, Tom, because this is something I asked Ryan Day the last time they beat Michigan. I think we talked to him maybe on the Monday afterwards or Tuesday afterwards, and I said, Ryan, did you feel more relief or more joy after the win? And he said it was relief.
Mm-hmm.
I would ask him the same thing this time, and I think the answer would be different this time.
I think the answer would be different, and I don't know if that would really be an honest answer. I think, honestly, it's very easy in 2019 when they've beaten Michigan, that would have been the 8th straight year they beat Michigan. It's very easy to say it was relief and not joy, because then you're not letting down the standard, and of course the expectation is beat Michigan. Now, if you say relief, it's like, oh, thank goodness I didn't think we could do it. I feel like the sort of subtext of that answer feels different in 2023 than it did in 2019. So, but yeah, as soon as you started saying that, I was like, I remember the question, I remember the answer. I think that was actually post game. I think I remember him doing that in the post game room at Michigan Stadium. Super chat from David Greenshield: best year statistically, Kyle McCord, AJ McCarthy, Drew Aller. I think best year statistically is not best quarterback. It's not best pro prospect. It's not best year statistically. Talk me out of betting on a Ryan Day offense.
I'm not. And we can go around the room and see if anybody's going to say not Kyle McCord, because I'm saying Kyle McCord.
Yeah, Jim Harbaugh. Is Jim Harbaugh going to have JJ McCarthy winging it all over the place, or is he going to be running Blake Corum 35 times a game?
There will be games where I think JJ McCarthy throws the ball 17 times.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And Drew Aller has a couple good running backs.
Exactly.
And I don't think that Drew Aller has quite the wide receiver core that Kyle McCord has. So, again, this is not the same question as which one is the best quarterback, which is the best pro prospect, which one is the best. Like, this is best year statistically.
Think of it as an Aiden O'Connell question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Kevin?
I think it's going to be McCord. I mean, one, because we know what the numbers are for Ohio State first-year starting quarterbacks. Two, we know that that JJ is going to have those 17 pass attempt games. And three, I think that with Aller, that is an offense that's predicated a lot more on the run than the Ohio State offense with Singleton and with Katron Allen. So I think that just unless Ohio State absolutely fizzles, it's going to have to be McCord.
Mark?
Yeah, it'll be. I'll go with the Ryan Day.
Yeah.
I mean,
Whichever.
Whichever quarterback, because every quarterback he puts out there seems to break Big Ten records. I mean, it's like 3 in a row. So
Yeah, it's a bigger leap of logic to think that Ryan Day's quarterback is not going to be really, really productive than to think that he will be.
All right, I need to address something in the comments from Hummus Hero. Thundercats was dope except for Snarf. What the heck was he there for? Snarf was the Orko to put this
No,
in.
you watch your mouth.
Snarf was the Orko of Thundercats. He was there to be a little bit of comic relief. He's providing. The Thundercats dealt with serious situations. You don't mess around with that. You can't take those things lightly. Snarf was there to provide some comic relief, much as Orko was on He-Man.
I heard that George Lucas based Jar Jar Binks off of those 2 terrible characters.
Is that true?
My favorite. I am not at all a Star Wars person. My favorite Star Wars. here's money. Go see a Star War. My favorite Star Wars theory is that Jar Jar Binks was supposed to be like this incredible dark Sith Lord. Thank you.
Bad guy
who was able to dodge all the things, and it was played off as comic, and he was supposed to actually turn into secretly. This is actually the king bad guy. Watch a lot of Star Wars, y'all. And that George Lucas, the backlash to Jar Jar Binks in the first remake was so bad that he wussed out and backed out and changed his plan. And that is my favorite theory. And I have watched videos online that sort of purport to show that, like, oh, look, this is, and I have not gone back and watched. The Jar Jar Binks one was the one where I was like, I think we're done with Star Wars now. And I have not seen any of the other ones, but the videos I have seen online, and you can believe everything you see online. So,
correct.
The videos I have seen online make it a very solid case.
I don't agree with that. I think that's some revisionist history. I agree the case is solid. Getting back to Thundercats, the reason I don't think much of them is because, like, to stop them, like, all you have to do is throw a big ball of yarn in the room, and then they're going to be like occupied, and you can go and do whatever evil thing you want to do.
All right, from Omar Austin, this is for Kevin. Robotech, Macross City, or Voltron.
Oh, Robotech, absolutely. It was absolutely
Nerds.
much more total nerds. It was much more high thought in it. It was more of a soap opera. Voltron was just a ripoff of G-Force. That was the first anime series that I got into. Didn't really get into too many more, but Robotech, absolutely. I remember always trying to get my homework done in time to be able to watch it on TV every day.
Got to get them spelling words done. Cat. CTA.
David Grinshield wants to know, how come the Mets waste money better than any other team in Major League Baseball?
This is a great episode of Buckeye Weekly.
Yeah, I mean, between the Thundercats and the Mets,
Speaking of things that were good in the 80s.
If I had... Well struck. Believe me, if I had the answer to that question, I would be living a much happier life right now, but I'm not. So it's just
wow, dark.
It is well, it's just they are what they are, and I have accepted my burden. I made my decision in 1983, and I've been stuck with it for 40 years, and it's fine. And eventually they have to win again, right? I mean, they won when I was in third grade. Both of my kids are now older than third grade, so we've now gone a full generation without them winning. At some point, they have to win, right?
Pete Cubs fans said that for a century, and they were right.
And they were right. Yes, exactly. Hey, remember when the show was going to end at 10 p.m.?
We were shooting for 10. Where are we now?
10:38 p.m.
10:38.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, it turns out we've had a bunch of really good listener questions, so that's good.
We can't leave if the questions are still popping.
Question,
no matter what they are about.
I think we have pretty much. Butch Jones wants to know, has Ryan Day ever actually said Michigan yet? I don't think so. I don't think I've ever heard Ryan Day. Every once in a while, you'll have a player.
He does say Michigan State.
He does say Michigan State. That's true. They are really surprisingly. You don't have guys slip on that
team wide. It's team up north.
Yeah,
team up north game, which is just an awkward phrase, but that's
Or
The rivalry game.
or
Yeah.
the game against our rivals, or
Mhm.
Yeah. One last thing. Did you listen to any of James Franklin today?
yeah, I was there for quite a bit of it.
At the very end, he was asked about Ohio State. Does he consider Ohio State a rival? And kind of talked around it a little bit and basically said, like, not really. So after years and years and years, and you know, I think Ryan Day and James Franklin both kind of put on the kind of sad to see that game go as an annual thing. It was for years and years and years, and even last year, a very good competitive game. Ohio State wins every year, but it's always, you know, it's always, how is Lucy going to pull the football away from Charlie Brown? It's always a really good, exciting game. It's always a great atmosphere. It's always, I mean, that is a game that I will miss going to when we go a couple of years without going to Penn State, because really, we were there last year. 2 years before that was COVID, where there was no fans in the stadium, and you know, it wasn't the same thing at all. And then 2 years before that was that great game with the big comeback at the very end, and you know, running the ball on 4th and 5 or whatever it was. You know, that is a game. And 2 years before that was the blocked field goal run back for a touchdown. 2 years before that was, I think, the Joey Bosa walk-off sack. I mean, like, you just go through, those are just great games. Every year, that's a great game. And there've been pretty good games in Columbus too, so that is going to be a little bit of a bummer to see that one go.
Yeah.
All right, Treasure the Torah.
Well, no, do
Oh.
Omar's first.
Oh, Omar says I can do this all night, fellas. Well, game on. Well, you've got time to send another one while we're doing one from our buddy Treasure the Torah. Tom, I know Travion Henderson is healthy, but I think he is still a non-factor this year. I think Dallin Hayden can be a more consistent, productive running back, respectively. What are your thoughts? We talked about this. Was it last night? We talked about this. Who's going to be the leading rusher this year? I picked Mayan Williams. Everyone picked Travion Henderson. I think you're going to have – the question is just who stays healthy.
Yeah.
And I think Dallin Hayden is probably the third guy in that mix. Ryan Day had positive things to say about Dallin Hayden today. He had positive things to say about Chip Trainum today. Evan Pryor is back and healthy. I mean, they've got 5 guys in there. And then when someone asked him about the 5 running backs, he went, well, actually it's 6 because you got Xavier Henderson in there too. I think you could see a good solid. I think you could see 500 yards out of at least 3 different guys. I think you could see 800 yards out of 2 different guys. I mean, I don't know that you're not going to have the J.K. Dobbins 1,900-yard season or 2,000-yard season like he did, because you're spreading the carries too thin. But either of those guys, if Mayan Williams stays healthy or if Travion Henderson stays healthy, I think you're getting a real good year out of either one of those guys.
I thought Ryan Day perked up when talking about Travion Henderson today and how he was healthy. And I think if anybody's expecting or their memory of Travion Henderson is just what they saw from him last year, that wipe that away. Go back to his freshman year and then think what he would be like better. Because I think that's what you're going to see. And of course, Mayan Williams also being healthy. Like those two are going to be, if they're healthy, because as Ryan Day said, we never got to see them fully healthy last year. And so I think everybody's really excited about Travion Henderson. Nobody more so than Travion Henderson, who had to deal with, obviously dealing with the injuries, dealing with social media, all of the doubts, the negativity. So I think he is really ready, and that's somebody who is going to be much better than they were last year when they were only averaging like 5.5 yards per carry, which is good at most places.
Yeah, I don't think Travion Henderson is going to have the J.K. Dobbins 2019 season in terms of top line production. You know, he's not going to have 1,900, 2,000 yards rushing. He could have the J.K. Dobbins 2019 season in terms of banged up, not, kind of disappointing second year, comes back, focused. He talked about dropping a little bit of weight in the spring, which is something Dobbins talked about. He's talked about, being focused. This is a contract year for him, much like it was for Dobbins. It feels like you could have the, kind of the eye of the tiger season out of him.
If he's healthy, have at him. You could have it at Mayan Williams. I mean, the talent is there. You could have it out of Dallin Hayden. I am fully bought in on the Dallin Hayden thing. And if Dallin Hayden was a starting running back, and you had no J.K. or no Trevin Henderson, and you had no Mayan Williams, I could see Dallin Hayden running for 1,300 yards this year.
Yeah.
100%. I just don't think carries are going to be there.
Right. And we don't know what Evan Pryor can do, so I won't include him in this, but I think they have 4 guys that could do 1,400 yards in a normal offense if they were the guy, if they were Mike Weber or Ezekiel Elliott or J.K. Dobbins, to where they're getting 225 carries.
I misread this one the first time and thought this should not be directed to me. This should be directed to the person who does watch a Star War. From Omar Austin, Tony, can you please do the job of the Hut laugh? As long as I don't need to wear a gold bikini, I'm fine with the super chat.
It's just something like Wookie solo.
So basically, what you do every time I make a joke.
Pretty much.
Okay.
We haven't got to talk about this, and we don't need to talk about this. I should mention we got to our favorite thing today, Tom. What was our favorite thing today? Talking to Dan Weinberg.
Oh yeah,
CBS Executive Vice President of Sports. There talking about the minutia of the college football broadcast draft, where they were like completely like, "Why do you want to know this?"
Yeah, I asked him at one point about the, how they strategize using their 6-day windows, and I'm going to be real brief on explaining this because either you care about this enough to know what I'm talking about, or you don't. 6-day window is basically there are certain game times that get announced months and months in advance. We already know what time the Indiana game is going to be. We know what time the Michigan State's game is going to be. We know what time the Michigan game is going to be. But there's a bunch of games in the middle of the season we don't know which, what time is Ohio State going to play? I don't know, whoever they're playing in the middle of the season. Rutgers. What time is Ohio State going to play Rutgers? And we don't know that because that's going to be decided when you get a couple weeks in the season and they figure out, okay, this team is good. This team is better than we thought. This team is worse than we thought. This is going to be a better game than we expect. This is going to be a worse game than we expected. They typically pick the games a couple weeks out. They have the option a couple times during the season to do what's called a 6-day window, which is basically, okay, there's an important game the week before the week that we want to pick. And we need to know, hey, is this team going to win or is this team going to lose? Because if this team wins this game, then the following week is massive. And if they lose, then it's not that important. And we want to have that information. But they can only do that a couple times during the course of the season. They have 2 6-day windows where they can pick a game with 6 days of notice because it's a huge pain in the butt for everyone else who has to go to the game. So they don't get to do it very often, but it's TV, so they get to do it. So I asked him about, how do you strategies? And it seems like you'd want to use them later, but, if there's a game early, how do you decide when you want to use those? And he looked at me, he's like, well, we are getting like really granular. It's like, yeah, I'm going to choose to take that as a compliment and not in the way that it was probably intended. Yes.
I like the one where you asked when you've got a bunch of games, do you draft that later in the draft because something good is going to be there? Because I would equate that to like a week with a bunch of good games. It's like a deep receiver draft. So
yes,
there'll be somebody there in the 3rd round. You don't need to jump on it. He's like, well, actually, those are sometimes the ones you take early on. I'm like, well, that's poor draft strategy. I didn't tell him that, but that's poor draft strategy.
And just for an example here, we're talking about like this year, the Ohio State Penn State game is the same week as the Michigan State game. So if you're not the first or the first network picking a game that week, that's okay because you're getting, if you're the second one, you're still getting a pretty good game. So that was a question, and there was a bunch of stuff he either couldn't or wouldn't answer.
Yes,
there's a lot of stuff that they didn't want to talk about, but this is the kind of stuff. It was a really interesting conversation, and we recorded it, and it was like I don't think we even need to put this out because there's not that much in there that people are really going to care about. But when we're talking, when you guys are asking us in a month and a half, well, hey, what time is the kickoff for the Maryland game going to be? This is the kind of stuff where we sort of try and, this is the information that we use to try and get you an informed answer on that.
Yeah, and we don't do that often. So.
You mean talk about TV times or make informed answers?
That's the one.
Yeah, I had a feeling. I think
Have we defeated the listeners?
people are just listing alcoholic
We're
beverages
talking-
right
we're
now.
talking
So
about beer now in the chat, so I think it's about.
yeah, the
All
last.
right.
I think it's Bureau.
All right, because I just want to go until 10.
Okay, well, we're on Central Time here, right? Is,
No.
that, is that right?
No, in fact, we are not,
oh,
Tom.
well, missed it.
We are on bedtime right now.
Missed it by that much.
So I want to thank everybody for joining us in the stream. Thank you for the super chats. Thank you for the regular chats. Always. Thank you for jumping on with us, Wednesday at 9:00 and staying for so long. So we do appreciate that. A reminder to check us out at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Become a member. Find us there on the message board. We are there. You can find us at YouTube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. Also Facebook.com/BuckeyeHuddle. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys later.